And hello, everyone. Welcome to the 37th Urban AI conversation, for which I have the great pleasure of welcoming Chiara Natali. Hi, Chiara.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you for having me here.
Chiara, great pleasure really of welcoming you actually to this Urban AI conversation. The topic is when AI Deskills and how to fix it. And that's definitely a hot topic. We've actually also been discussing on the previous Urban AI conversation, but basically this idea, and thanks to you and your research, we'll better understand it, but this idea that AI might potentially descale some specific workers on how it is used today, and also because you propose a solution, not only a diagnosis, like how we could counter it through what you call frictional AI. So really looking forward to this conversation, not only actually maybe for our network of planners, like on how they could better interact with AI without, in a sense, descaling, but really more broadly also on artificial intelligence and human machine interaction. Just a few words about Urban AI. Urban AI is a global organization dedicated to the emerging field of urban artificial intelligence. We federate a think tank, a community, and an academy, and we regularly organize those Urban AI conversations. And the goal of those Urban AI conversations is to welcome international experts, researchers, decision makers, entrepreneurs, to explore and discuss with them the latest research, as it's the case today with Chiara, or also like projects or even sometime ID. And so for this 37th Urban AI conversation, we welcome Chiara Natali, who is PhD student in human AI interaction in Milan, actually, and who will be submitting her thesis in 10 days. So thanks. Thanks for being with us in this challenging time. We will first have a 20-minute presentation from Chiara, then a fireside chat. By the way, feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself, let us know who you are, what you are doing, and also if you have questions, remarks, observations, to share them. If you've been following our conversation, you know that I will definitely ask your remarks to Chiara. Chiara, the floor is now all yours for your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much for the very kind introduction. I will now share my screen. Let me know if you can all see it. And as was anticipated, the topic will be deskilling, how to fix it, to avoid it. But I will tackle this topic by going over how to strike a balance in decision support systems between over-reliance and under-reliance. I'm proposing a strategy that we termed frictional AI. We investigated the topic of deskilling in the field of medicine. AI-induced deskilling was the topic of a mixed method research, of a mixed method literature review. I also want to thank also Professor Massimo Miglioretti for his insights from organizational psychology. So this is a topic that we tackled about expert work in medicine, while also taking into account organizational perspectives and our own knowledge from the field of AI and philosophy. So about the definition of deskilling, we provided definitions from the literature, for example, with deskilling as the erosion of medical expertise, so the erosion of an expertise that was already there, that is caused by for example, relying too much on a decision support system and not practicing anymore the skills that were acquired over time. And on the other side, we distinguish it from the similar phenomenon of upskilling inhibition. So in this case, it is more so the case of for example, trainee doctors who from the start are supported by decision support systems, do they actually acquire those independent reasoning skills? So the reason why AI is particularly interesting and also problematic in its impact on decision making is that compared to the other technologies, it doesn't just act on the sensory layer. So for example, in medicine, when you think about new technological additions, we think about instruments, measurements, so the microscope, for example. So things that give us new information on which our own decision making is applied. On the other side, with decision support systems, we more so have some prepackaged decisions to which the human acts more as an auditor of, rather than the full-fledged decision maker. In a previous AI conversation, you went over some topics more related to the cognitive aspects of this, the neuroplasticity. What is interesting in this case is the principle of use it or lose it. And so the idea that if we do not practice certain skills, we will unavoidably lose them. So on the other side, we ask ourselves, what about using deliberately the skills to regain it? And what if we design the interaction, we design the system so that we avoided the risk of not using our own intuition? So this is a topic of the research lab that I'm part of, Moody Lab in University of Milano Bicocca. It is headed by my PhD supervisor, Professor Federico Cabizza, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today. We're a very multidisciplinary group, and in this sense, we can. This has helped us in looking at technology and our interaction with it in with a different perspective from the usual engineering one. So in this sense, I like quoting one of my favorite musicians, David Byrne, from the Talking Heads, and sort of musician in his own right, is the fact that human interaction from an engineering side is more seen as a problem to be solved, and the problem to be solved is this sort of noisy, inefficient nature of the human side. So the idea that this interaction has to be made frictionless, but still recognizes that this frictionlessness means getting the human part out of the way, in a sense. So compared to the pursuit of AI as a sort of oracle, we want to shatter these pursuits, and on the other hand, propose a sort of paradigm shift. So we see biased in engineering, biased decision making is seen more as a human problem. So in this sense, there are lots of issues that come from example from the idea that humans are lazy, that humans are will tend to just go with the option that is presented to them, with the fact that our computational capability, in a sense, is a bit more limited compared to a supercomputer. And this is the kind of vision where efficiency truly trumps your human responsibility. On the other hand, we want to say that biased decision-making is more so a design problem of the interaction, that an interaction in which biases emerge should be rethought in a way, and the fact that human responsibility should take precedence over mere efficiency. So this is a perspective that is present in human-computer interaction, and in particular into design theories that inspired me and us. So, for example, the idea of slow design, so encouraging people to do things at the appropriate pace, at the right time, right speed. So, pushing for reflection. On the other side, we have seamful design. So it's more about exposing the seams, exposing the gaps, uncertainties that are in the AI outputs. So inviting the user to question and further interpret the AI output. Altogether, moving towards human AI interaction, we propose the idea of frictional AI as more of an umbrella term. So in this case, it would be methods that encourage reflection in human AI decision making by introducing a sort of cognitive friction with the aim of avoiding over reliance on AI output. But now let's see what we mean by this. So we see reliance on AI on the side of humans to display some problems sometimes. There's the fact of over reliance, so of automation bias. It is when users follow AI even against their own best judgment. They just defer to the machine. And this, of course, can weaken human responsibility. On the other side, however, we have under-reliance, more so conservatism bias. It is typical, for example, of a person who does not trust AI at all. But this also is problematic in a sense because AI has the potential of helping us not make mistakes. So if one under-relies on it, may miss out on this chance of improving their own decision making. So the appropriate middle is one of appropriate reliance, and it is the balance where decision making skills are enhanced. So in the case of frictional AI, there are several strategies that we've seen in human AI interaction. One is the case of cognitive forcing functions, so interventions that aim to disrupt heuristic thinking. It is the case, for example, of interaction processes, termed, for example, human first, in which the user is asked to make a decision before being exposed to the AI advice. On the other side, we will have more so micro boundaries, design frictions. These are akin to speed bumps that truly interrupt the person and disrupt their mindless automation. So not too distant as a concept to cognitive forcing functions. And in this sense, we have the example of nudging through friction by Nice and colleagues. So for example, little prompts telling you to evaluate for example, the explanatory output of the system. And another example is that of programmed inefficiencies, so presenting outputs in a way that engages the user cognitively, that requires them a little bit more of an interpretative effort. And one example is ways of presenting the answer that also allows for AI abstention and that in general avoid providing straightforward numbers to avoid the idea that 51% is necessarily bigger than 49% chance, let's say, but to truly be able to capture the meaning of uncertainty. Other ways of interacting are, for example, hypothesis-driven support, which provides ideas for and against a specific answer by the human. The idea of AI as a provocateur, so this sort of sidekick that instead tries to criticize your own advice, your own outputs. Let's say decisions to help you reason more, or also like similarly antagonistic AI. So a way for the AI to put forward its advice in a way that is a bit more challenging. And so there's many types of friction that we can think of and deploy, let's say. But what friction should be the case for a specific setting? Well, our research is mainly on the medical side. So I would share, for example, a qualitative study, a series of interviews with French radiologist practitioners in the field of oncology. Here, for example, when speaking about the type of AI support that they received, they had some strong opinions. And for example, they said that above all, the way to present the informations for them, the way that truly helps them in diagnostic reasoning is comparisons. So, for example, comparing the trajectory of the illness within the single patient, or on the other side, comparing a specific case to similar ones to other patients. So this would be the case of a comparative protocol that shares, for example, the diagnosis for a similar case. There's the idea on not giving decision, but rather giving probabilities. In this sense, let's say respecting the primacy of the doctor in the decision making, and offering more so help on the probabilistic side. So on the other hand, with an adjunct protocol, this is more in line with the idea of the machine must stay in its place, shouldn't tell do this, do that, but perhaps, for example, a system that is summoned by the doctor only when requested, or for example, that only provides its advice in addition to an earlier human diagnosis. So in this case, we have to think about how to evaluate these interventions. Accuracy can be a rather limiting metric when we're mostly interested, for example, in the way in which people make mistakes, and so if they rely on the AI too much. So this leads to the importance of reliance patterns and user perceptions. So in this case, we evaluated automation bias simply in as follows. So for example, if there's an earlier human opinion which is correct and is pre-registered, that shifts to an incorrect opinion because it is convinced by wrong AI advice, then this is automation bias happening. We have developed systems to measure automation bias once you provide these tables for each medical decision, and this provides a sort of visualization that shows whether over-reliance happens and to which degree. So here in this case, we have an example of a system where automation bias is not so present. So showing an example of a case, we have a discussion on a comparative protocol in radiology. It involves 16 orthopedics, and each one of them had to make the clinical decision about 18 X-ray cases. So in this type of support, the human first made a decision, and then the AI displayed 3 similar cases. 2 were matching the classification that was provided by the clinician, and the other was more of a doubt-inducing injection. So it is actually presenting a case from the opposite class in a binary setting. Here we're talking about fracture or no fracture. So it is a case of showing, considering the alternative. So In this case, we observed some different impacts according to the level of expertise of the user. Well, in general, 2/3 of decision changes that were caused by the system were for the better, and especially so for experts. In fact, automation bias was 2.5 times larger in known experts rather than specialists. So this leads us to the idea of a targeted friction. So we have to ask ourselves, when do we slow users down? And so, for example, this should be tailored according to context, according to risk. And on the other side, which intervention for which users? So, for example, whether we should go by experience level or perhaps more like psychological variables, such as the score on a need for cognition scale. So, there are some next steps that we're looking forward to. One of them, we're currently wrapping up a qualitative study, still pre-peer review. It involved in-depth interviews and use of 2 prototypes by 11 practitioners, radiologists in Switzerland. So in this case, there's the idea of a sort of more authoritative system being one that erases the capacity of searching for answers, while the other system, the one that provided similar cases, despite requiring some extra minutes of deliberation on the side of the specialist, it still gave them more confidence in their conclusion. So, the next steps are the idea of characterizing beneficial friction in AI as a research field and provide contextual and domain-specific guidelines. So, on this aspect, we just had at the beginning of the summer the 2nd edition of the Stimulating Cognitive Engagement in Hybrid Decision-Making workshop, in which we're trying to create a sort of event where such themes are discussed. In fact, between these 2 years, we saw some emerging narratives that are mainly about cognitive biases, the decision-making process, the primacy of interaction, the user-centeredness, and we have a website that is linked here below, and I will link also after. But in general, we've hosted some very interesting discussions in general on these topics. The proceedings for the 2025 edition are still in press, while the one of last year are available online and also on our website. So if you're interested in this topic, I very much suggest reading these contributions. And we also have a mailing list. So for all those that are interested in this topic, whether they're call for papers that you want to share, events, talks, or search for collaborators, or have some opinion on the studies you're conducing. So, in conclusion, let's say that what I hope will be the main takeaway is that optimizing the decision-making process is as important as optimizing the system's accuracy, especially if we're thinking about avoiding unintended consequences such as those of deskilling. But of course, it is necessary to evaluate the impact to ensure that this friction that is added is a challenge more than a frustration. So thank you very much. Here I keep the links to the workshop website, to the mailing list, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Julie Chiara, for the fascinating presentation, actually showcasing this and better explaining this very impactful, powerful, and activable concept of frictional AI. Maybe. So I actually have several questions specifically to the concept and also maybe on, let's say, system thinking. I might have just before some questions on the diagnosis. So some of the first slides you presented. So just trying to understand in the medical world, under which conditions your research demonstrated that AI deskill professionals?
So let's say that evaluating the skilling is an incredibly long and also ethically fraught process because you have to follow, for example, a cohort of novices and evaluate different interventions of AI. So our observations and our understanding of this skilling mainly comes from the literature and, for example, the literature reviewed that we worked on and shared. But what we saw, for example, is more so on the immediate impact of automation bias on the less expert users. So we do see this happening right now, how less expert users are more prone to over reliance on a system, and so from this we can draw some conclusions and implications that will need to be investigated more in a longitudinal manner. But in general, also qualitatively in the interviews, there have been some very interesting insights. Of course, not just from specialists who are sort of worried about the future learning process of novices because they're, of course, attached to the way that they learned. They may fear, for example, the implications of having a crutch from the get-go. On the other side, we also saw the example of trainees who were supported by the decision support systems. This is the case of the oncological radiology case presented. Here, for example, a trainee shifted his gaze from the computer when the system was flagging the answer. So in that sense, they would literally close the window, go back into looking at the image, and only then. So again, it isn't just about what the system is doing, it's about how you interact with it. And I'm not pessimist about this. I really think that people, and especially those with very high responsibility positions, will care about their learning and their own experience. But it is important to make sure that they have the right means and the right tools to do this. And that's our research.
Okay, because when you say less expert users, did you mean less expert user with the AI or with less? Yeah.
In this case, it's more about your own baggage of professional knowledge, of medical knowledge, pre-existing knowledge. And this is also, let's say, the case in which frictional interventions make sense. This is not, of course, a sort of blanket intervention at all. In order to gain value from a slower interaction, you must leverage knowledge that you have and you want to cultivate. So yes, what we're referring to is the pre-existing expertise of the user that has been practiced over books, over hands-on practice, and so on, and should not be disrupted by decision support.
Okay, super interesting. Well, thanks for sharing. And I might have an additional question on this topic. So from what you say, less expert users, so like individual with less knowledge and skills in a specific domain are more exposed to deskilling. Does it mean that experienced professionals have no risk in deskilling? Or, yeah.
Of course, it's the skilling still exists as a as a phenomenon per se, that is distinct between what happens for novices and experts. So that is the reason why we actually we adopted the literature's two terms for this phenomenon. So on the aside, deskilling, which is more the blanket term, but also specifically the upskilling inhibition. So in this sense, when we're talking about novices, the deskilling that we observe is more about not acquiring the knowledge. On the other side, yes, the skilling is theoretically possible at every stage if let's say if over-reliance is sustained over time. And this, again, probably a callback to the already had discussions on the topics of neuroplasticity and, in general, the importance of still being engaged cognitively, in a sense of keep deliberating, keep practicing, as to avoid, let's say, losing the skills.
Okay, super interesting. So actually, both like novices and experienced, like in a sense, will be exposed, but very differently on this domain. You mentioned the different components of frictional AI, one being slow design, and I'm wondering, so how do we incentivize like final users to take the time and to like reflect and slow their process? Because even if it's a kind of personal, maybe also reflection I'm sharing, even if, for example, I would like to slow down on some task, I might be pressed in a sense by some constraints, which we could call the system, basically. So there is this kind, of counter pressure from the system, and I believe that maybe many individuals would like to slow down, but they have to do many things. So how do we deal with those counter forces?
Yeah, it is a case for advocating, in a sense, of a more let's say modulating friction. So in this sense, also in our interviews, let's say that there's a certain overhead of cases that are really and truly immediately straightforward. And in this sense, the doctors we talked to were more about having help with the triage. So when something is truly, let's say, clear as day, just a broken arm into, let's say, perhaps in that case, we can think about, again, modulating the friction as to help for a swift decision, and instead, let's say, calling for human intuition where it is really most important. For example, in the literature review, there was a lot of emphasis on skills that remain extremely relevant even in the age of AI. And it is, for example, that has to do with the human touch, with the sort of intuitive lateral thinking. So in this case, not all AI is supposed perhaps to make you slow down, but it is important to consider those cases in which it is strongly needed. Yes, there's just so much to think about.
You mentioned the term intuition, which is like a kind of very interesting, actually, and powerful concept. And I'm wondering, how do you envision actually the role of professional intuition in human AI interaction? Like, it is very often said that maybe like by overusing AI, we might have less places to some fundamentally human qualities such as intuition. But I would be quite interested actually on having a kind of research perspective on this idea.
Yes, and I think that, for example, that's where asking for the human opinion before the AI advice can still help you make use of this aspect uh, of uh, of human intuition. Let's say that it will be great to leverage the capability of AI in correcting our mistakes more as a safety net compared to the qualities and skills that we already have, instead of being a substitute to it. So it's also a great driver in adoption for systems if people feel that if people who are being aware of specific limitations know that they have a sidekick in a sense that is ready to step in these cases. For example, already thinking again about the case of speed that is necessary, or like this, was the case of doctors in interview who said that they especially feared committing over reliance, yeah, for example, at night, during night shifts, or when there is specific very high pressure. So in this case, a system that sort of let's say calls you back to attention when in situations in which people know they are more prone to over reliance, then it could be something everyone sees the value of.
It's connect with what you said in your presentation. I don't remember which slide exactly, but you highlighted the importance of having a kind of situational, contextual approach to fictional AI,
Yes.
depending on the timing, on the people. And I'm wondering, how do we achieve this, like very concretely, in a sense? Like, does it mean that those AI would need to have more individual data, or to access, I don't know, some sensory data? Is it something you're
Mhm.
already working on?
So let's say that in general, the big divide that we were looking at was more on the expertise side and the phase of learning of the person. So this is surely a big divide, and which also has impacts for what concerns de-skilling. There is some research into taking into account also this cognitive dimensions. I refer to need for cognition, for example, which measures the sort of enjoyment that a person has in actually stopping by and reflecting. Other aspects are instead big five type of personality assessment. But eventually, these things will have to be observed in place, and we still haven't pursued this line of research, but it's in the next steps, the sort of more individual, tailor-made, rather than group level um, of personalization, let's say, but it's definitely something I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And maybe in a sense, let's call, we will then focus more specifically on urban planners, but let's anticipate and
Mhm.
let's a kind of call of experimentation. If urban planners are interested maybe in implementing frictional AI principles, maybe they should definitely reach out to you, because this is what you shared. It's an emerging concept, and thanks actually for presenting such an emerging, innovative, and ethical concept. So yeah, definitely. So looking for practitioners in a sense to adopt it. I might have another question. You specify the role of AI as a provocator.
Yeah.
Uh, Can you elaborate on this, Heidi, concretely? Like, what does it look like?
This research comes from a research group that I really admire. It's from Microsoft Tools for Thought. I invite anyone to go and look at their research. This in particular comes from Sarkar. He proposed the idea of AI that should challenge, not obey. So more the idea of a sparring partner, a sort of yes, someone who's over there who doesn't just glaze everything that you say. And this is actually something that we can see instead with commercial large language models. Let's say that it can also be a sort of opposition to that. So rather than someone just telling you, amazing, these are all the reasons why you're right, I really like this concept because it's in the end the final responsibility rests with you. And so considering have this type of honest support, I guess it's truly beneficial.
And could we, like, let's say I'm a ChatGPT or Claude or such kind of LLM user, how could I embed such provocation, or let's say more broadly, frictional AI? Is it possible as a final user in kind of prompt engineering to
that's a research that I'm looking forward to doing. So sort of trying to see how to ensure this sort of interaction also with LLMs. Of course, due to some inherent unpredictability, this has some complications to it in ensuring that the sparring partner version, let's say, would actually come through as desired. But of course, I mean, friction is as much about system design as it is about the way we interact with this system. And for example, even a completely either, the oracular system that just tells you it is this, or a system that just tells you it is right. In this sense, the frictional, let's say, ethos is also about you stepping back, deciding to practice your own intuition, your own craft, looking at the potential help that can come from AI and deciding whether to evaluate further evidence, whether to look for it, and in general, how to leverage the system for your own goals in a way that is respectful of your own skill.
And how do you achieve this as a professional, as a practitioner? Do you already know how you get this kind of knowledge, kind of embodied expertise, which bring you to a more balanced relationship with technology?
Oh, well, it's like I'm very immersed in it. I'm in a strange situation in which, for me, acquiring skill is equal to acquiring knowledge in the PhD. And I'm also acquiring knowledge about AI, which also means interacting with AI. Of course, in this sense, it's all about a ethical use of the systems, especially, again, we mentioned the case of large language models. So honing your own craft rather than offloading it, and keep an inquisitive, open mind in order to keep open the possibilities of different ways to interact with it. Like, strangely, it's not just about how I will do it, but the way I do it will shape my research. So, yeah.
You several times used the term craft, which is very beautiful term. And I'm wondering, I guess it's on purpose. Is it like because it reflects a kind of cognition engagement or effort? Like, why? Because it's not that much usual when we are talking about digital interaction, to use craft. So I'm just wondering why specifically this term
Yeah,
actually.
it's a way to bring it back to a sort of more tangible sort of understanding, more physical understanding, and that's really all that friction is about. In a sense, friction is also a physical sensation. It's the properties of bodies that interact. So I like to think in these terms in sense of craft and something that you have to practice and you have to bring into your daily experience.
I might have another kind of maybe of philosophical, let's say, or even civilizational
Let me use the
question.
masters.
um, so, like, I'm wondering, like, if we don't need a kind of new mindset to
Mhm.
really flow with your recommendations and this frictional and kind of craft ethical, which is like really very responsible, as you said, ethical and beautiful in many sense. But when you see some directions today, and you said it in a
Mhm.
sense at the beginning of the presentation, we're more looking to creating frictionless interactions. And actually, it's not only in business, it looks like even on our social media, even like, in our how daily experience are shaped, we're looking to this. So how do we reverse this kind of ambient narrative, and how do we, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is really a matter of competing narratives. What the main narrative is the Silicon Valley sort of move fast and break things, as the old Facebook motto, which is now a bit, let's say, infamous and uh, really, really telling of this sort of development. Um, of course, it's slow. If we go back to the basics, for example, slow design, it also reminds again of some specific, like in Italy, we have this thing called slow food. So it means a sort of um, the sort of food and culinary experience that you get from engaging with local products. Of course, you end up spending a little more. You end up taking more time by walking to the local grocer rather than just going to a superstore and just having everything at once. But people do see value in this. In a sense, especially for very sensitive matters, such as medicine, we could think in a sense that it could provide also sort of um, reassurance, saying that the hospital that I go to, it implements responsible human AI interaction in the decision making. Could be something that you're made aware of the interaction strategies. In that sense, of course, again, it's not something that is generalizable at every facet of life. But in the more delicate ones, in the ones where we see a specific value that we want to preserve, so for example, skill and responsibility in medical practice, then actually having a more a more intentional kind of approach such as this can be something that people can rally behind. That can be, yeah, perhaps a call for this.
So indeed, that's not the only narrative, the frictionless
Mhm.
narrative. There are many others flourishing, and as you said, we have way of highlighting them. We have a way of like showing their own value, definitely. So we have in our network, I would say, mainly city makers, urban planners,
Mhm.
but I believe really like your research is definitely on interest, not only for the medical world and actually not only for urban planners and the urban world, but for all people, let's say, interacting and working with AI, like how to not de-skill and how to keep cognitive engagement and autonomy.
Mhm.
But if maybe we go back specifically to some urban planners, even if I know I'm aware it's not your area of research, but which recommendation could you extrapolate or could you give not only for medical workers on how to have a more intentional and yeah, cognitively engaged approach of AI?
Um, I would actually be very interested in not only how AI is used in a way that is intentional, but also once perhaps AI decision support will become more present even in the urban planning side, perhaps to reflect where friction should be kept also in the outputs, also in the results. So, for example, we could think about urban planning done by AI. Okay, this is so efficient. Cars will go from one side to the city to the other in 3 minutes. And then you say, okay, but where is the friction that we want to keep? Where is the corner where we know that the school crosses the grocer and that makes for, I don't know, what about those areas that are not for efficiency but are rather for a more slow and intentional way of being. So it is more like resisting perhaps the also the call for efficiency, not just in the way of, we'll just delegate to AI how to optimize this thing. So of course, perhaps don't do that, but also consider, even when you engage thoughtfully, the result may still have inside the kind of values that are inherent to AI, that is optimization at all cost, a sort of blindness to the human condition. So in this sense, consider always also where friction, where slowing down is something that should be considered also in the areas in which we live and our way of living.
How do you define those area of frictions? Is it based on value? Is it based on a methodology? Is it like how? Yeah, what's your recommendations on this?
I mean, there are several, let's say, frictions. It's of course, friction in a physical term reminds us of speed and something that goes against speed. But it can also mean more in the sense of straightforward efficiency. Like in my mind, I'm thinking about something that a case that is a bit close to my heart, that is reconstruction of an area after an earthquake. It was the case of Sicily with Valle del Belice in the 60s. And in that case, there were, the houses were those typical of, like multi-nuclear families. There were a lot of people living there, having their own social life, having their own way of they organized life. And with reconstruction, it was more of like, the efficient thing is to just have a nuclear structure. Let's build very big houses in concrete. This is where a square should be, so let's just put it there, blah, blah, blah. And instead, like efficiency didn't reflect the actual need of the people that were there. You could say that multi-generational houses for a specific setting are inefficient, but the new city wasn't really didn't lost its soul in a sense.
So those area of interventions, you define them with people and communities and what they value in their own systems, in a sense, systems of value.
Yeah, it can be, yes.
Okay, amazing. Well, really, thanks a lot, Chiara. Thanks again for taking the time to share your research and to discuss also this concept of fictional AI, and also actually to playing the game of extrapolating in urban planning, because I know it's not your area of research and it's never easy to do this. So really, thanks a lot. That was a fascinating episode. I know we put in comments already your research, and I potentially also your website. And so if we have like practitioners, researchers interested in fictional AI theoretically or practically, they should definitely reach out to you. That's already the end. That's already the end of the conversation. We will see again next week. It will be still on Wednesday, this time at 6 p.m., so a bit later, and we will be with Manon Revel, working at Google DeepMind, and we will exploring the topic of liquid democracy, AI, and cities. And maybe we'll talk about frictions once again.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Cara.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.